development and testing. And also really good experience working as a team in a software development type deal, and kind of worked with each other really well, I think, like sharing ideas, and if we had troubles, we could go to our teammates. And just getting to some of the requirements and use cases, both customer and supplier, we wanted them to be able to create an account and log into their account, and then specifically, we wanted the customer to be able to add items to their cart and to be able to check out, and a supplier should be able to upload their items as well as remove them.
All right, let's see some demo.
And going on to the home page, we have what I think is a pretty neat UI here very quickly, courtesy of Bootstrap. You know, it makes things a lot easier to develop very fast in a short period of time. And for example, building the navigation bar, they use class attributes within your markup to say, you know, you would say nav bar fixed top, and that gives you your top navigation. And then as you shrink the screen size, Bootstrap is really smart and kind of knows, all right, you're down to maybe a tablet or a phone, let's give you this navigation bar. And that, they kind of give you that, Bootstrap gives you that feature right out of the box. So that's really cool, but what's even cooler is when you shrink the screen down, you can apply your own style. For that screen, for a tablet screen, you know, you can kind of, say you wanted just a 2-column for mobile, you can just say column span 6, because they use a grid system of 12. And then for a tablet, if you wanted 3, obviously you could break it down differently. So you can kind of get a nice, clean user experience no matter what device they're using. And going to our carousel feature, which is kind of our cool feature that we built. That's also a Bootstrap, but we kind of adjusted it and tinkered with it to make it do what we wanted it to do. And this actually uses Ajax to get 5 random items. It sends a message to the controller to say, to call a method to get us 5 random objects, and then it's converted to JSON, and it's brought back to the JavaScript side where jQuery breaks down each one in the loop and builds the 5 items that we have here. If you want to refresh the screen so we can prove that it's sure that it works.
Uh-oh. Were you guys having resolution
We had
problems?
resolution issues as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, this is unfortunate.
Yeah, that was a bug that we haven't encountered. We just tried going back to locals. Sorry.
So you reload it again.
There we go.
Interesting.
You want to refresh and...
I'll hope for the best. Okay, looks like
yeah,
that's
we
not.
can't refresh at all. Okay.
Why don't we just move into one of the use cases?
Yeah, let's now we'll kind of go through our use case kind of from a supplier standpoint and also a buyer standpoint or a customer standpoint. We'll start with supplier. And you'll see the supplier sign up form kind of has validations. If you click, if they enter something wrong, you get your validations, and then as you key in, it kind of tells you, okay, you're free to move on. A nice jQuery key up feature. And also, these check against regular expressions in the JavaScript code as far as what we could use HTML5 for some of this too, but we wanted to kind of define our own data that we wanted to allow in. So. And now that we're logged in, pass it over to Paul.
Okay, so now I'm a supplier. What if I want to, upload a product? I want to sell some product. So I will click on my item. And then after that, I can click on upload product. and I can choose an image for my product. This is the main functionality of our application. So when a supplier hit upload image, the image will be stored in a specific folder in our web server, and the path to go into that file will be stored in the database. The reason why we do that, because we don't want to store too much heavy data in our database. And this will like increase our database performance if we just store a string. So after I enter all the information of my product, I can just hit upload product to post the product. Okay. Now I can check if my product is uploaded already by browse it. So right here I just upload a baseball product, and I can click on baseball. Just scroll all the way down. My product is over here. But like, what if like later on, for example, like after 3 months, I couldn't sell this product, and I want to come back to edit the description. Then I can just like go to my item and click on it, and then edit the description. I can check it again if my description is updated. Okay, so what if like I'm a supplier and I'm trying to like add a product to cart? No, I cannot do that because I'm a supplier, I have a shopping cart. So next, Ethan gonna go ahead and sign in as a customer and buy my product.
Okay, so basically right here, we're gonna log out, which is basically ending the user session. And now we can log back in, which also works from any screen on the website. Basically, here we are at the sign-in screen. We've got email and password, which also validates not only that your email exists, it also validates the correct password. Here we've got a forgot password function, which implements a message bean. Basically, if you click that, as you can see, it's responsive and doesn't actually send the email, but could implement that feature. From here again, password validate, and here we are back at the logged in header. Basically customized header again. We have the same features up top, manage account, where the info is displayed. Of course, you're welcome to edit that information, and the same validations are there as well. Again, now we have the same My Items link, however now it's to a customer specific page. As opposed to having your items that you've uploaded if you're a supplier. Obviously now you have your shopping cart, your purchase history, the customer use case really being fulfilled here. So for instance, as a customer, now we can really browse around the site, you know, really add items to your cart as you please. The product we just uploaded. Again, from here we can change the quantity, we can remove the product, we can go into our purchase history and add products, and ultimately remove them and check out, change quantities as you please. Here's our checkout process. Very basic. We didn't get too in-depth here, but essentially it just gives you a brief overview of what you're actually buying, of course, the items, the total, etc. We didn't get payment information just because we weren't actually validating that. It would not be too difficult to implement more pages to obtain that information. So for now, we're just extracting the user's email and address and allowing them to confirm that order. And as you can see now, this item belongs in the purchase history, and they're free to give them the quantity that they've purchased, and they can always go back and add it at any time. Yeah, essentially that's it. And then when you log out, again, it ends the session that we just created, so now we're back at the logged out header, and now Chase will demonstrate one of our other features we implemented beyond our use cases of just a customer and supplier. We also wanted to give some business functionality, so we created a specialized admin account which has some special features.
Yeah, so we as the maintainers of the site, we're not selling anything, but we still want to make our money. So we're taking some sort of commission on every order or every transaction, that sort of thing. But to make that process better, we need to have some sort of information, some sort of reporting. We also wanted to practice with stored procedures. because we hadn't used them in any other section of the project. So we used stored procedures to implement some reporting. You can go ahead and log into that admin account. We only did some very, very basic stats to start off with. It was mostly just for practice, see if it all got working. So you can see it's a little more customized for the administrator. He's got, the little dashboard button. It's basically the page for our reporting. But we found this to be like very important for this project because this is how we get our information. You know, if we want to find out some particular supplier is really good, we want to know that. If some particular product is selling really well, we want to know that. And can you go ahead and click on that? Like I said, we just did some very basic stats. I wouldn't really call it reporting at this point, but you could really go crazy on this page. I mean, you can figure out projected sales, like I said, find out specifics on specific products or specific suppliers, and just kind of see where things are at, see what areas you want to influence more, so we can make more money off of this thing. Plus, like I said, we got to practice with stored procedures, which is something we hadn't used anywhere else in the project. All right, so that basically wraps up the demo. You saw we had some use cases. We implemented them, start to finish, full life cycle. Now we can give you a little bit of an idea of how we actually got there. So,
Are there any questions before we end the demo and go back to the PowerPoint? No? Okay. Okay, so now that you've seen our finished product and where we came from, the background, the goals we were trying to achieve, you might be interested in the technology that we use to achieve this. Basically, we use Spring Tool Suite, which is essentially Eclipse Luna with the Java Enterprise Edition built into it, using Java 6, MySQL as our database, which we're connecting to via the JDBC, the Java Database Connection API. For our server, we're using JBoss, primarily because it supports Enterprise Java Beans. We're using EJB 2.0 here, and beyond the Java and the other technology, we also used several web-oriented languages, as you can see listed there, for the responsive design and all of the view aspect of the project. So the overall project architecture, at a very broad level, we implemented an N-tier or multi-tier architecture system. Basically, this is a very typical layout of an N-tier architecture system. Basically what we're doing here is separating the presentation from the business and the data. I'll go into benefits on the next slide here, but essentially our primary goal for this is separation of concerns. What this means is this allows parallel development, as listed here. Basically, because we have each isolated component in a unique layer, it allows each of us to work on different parts at different times without having to worry about code infiltrating throughout the different layers. They're encapsulated components, and because of that, it allows for code reusability and flexibility. We can reuse the different layers in different applications, and like I said earlier, it's much easier to implement changes because that change only needs to be made at the specific layer, and the other layers will remain unchanged. And obviously that improves maintainability, scalability as well, because as these changes grow, you are not affecting the whole project, but rather just a layer at a time, wherever the scalability needs to be implemented. So our implementation of the N-tier architecture design would be the MVC design pattern, which would be the model view controller. Essentially what's going on here, very briefly, is we have the view, which is the presentation layer, what the client is actually looking at when they go on our website, and the model, which is the business side of things, which also connects to the database, which would be MySQL, and we have the controller, which basically allows those two to communicate. I'm not going to go too in depth because that's what these guys are going to do in the next few slides, but just as a general outline, this is essentially a design pattern that we implemented. And moreover, within the MVC, there are also several other design patterns floating around. For example, we've got the DAO, DTO, business delegate, service locator, facade, dispatcher, and front controller. Again, just listing these very quickly here, and we're going to go more in depth in that right now as Chase leads you into the controller side of the MVC.
yeah, so a controller, C of MVC. So in Java Enterprise, controller is handled by a servlet, and that's exactly what we did. Like you said, we used front controller design pattern. So this, as you can see from the simple little image, we basically have one entry point to the application. So we know where everything's coming in, and this allows us to, we get to decide where we want to send this request in our application. Users aren't directly accessing internal components. They come into one spot, we make that decision. We can see what's coming in, we can sanitize inputs, we can throw stuff out, we can manipulate it before we do send it into the application. It gives us a lot of control over what goes in and what comes out. Yes, it says delegates tasks. So that's a benefit it gives us, but its main job is to delegate those tasks. It figures out, is this request valid? Do I actually want to handle it? And if I do, let me put it to a more specific controller. So I named them handlers here, but that's basically its main purpose. Figure out where this thing needs to go and actually send it there. Sorry for all the wall of code, but it's really easy to read. So you can basically see this is our main controller, simplified version of course. An action comes in. Every request has an action. We figure out what that is, decide what's a broad area that it's trying to affect. From there we have our specialized controllers, and then we can decide what we actually want to do, what we're telling that specialized controller to do. All right, so model of MVC. So model basically has two broad parts. You've got your business part and data part. The business part of it we did with EJBs and lots of regular Java classes just as kind of helpers and assistants and all that kind of thing. Two of the design patterns he listed, business delegate and service locator. This is really good because a lot of the EJB stuff can get kind of complicated. There might be a lot of stuff happening. When, as a client, you really just want to do things, you want to have this simplified, coarse grain type of functionality. You just want to create a customer. You don't have to worry about, well, am I logging this or am I logging that, or do I have to manipulate something, or do I have to call 10 queries? Don't worry about that. So this is kind of like a facade pattern as well. It hides all of that complexity. It makes it really easy to use. You just say create, and it gets created. You don't have to worry about anything else. Service locator, basically another form of this. Looking up beans, you got to deal with JNDI, and you got to know bean names, and so on and so forth. This all gets taken care of by the service locator. You just say, I'm looking for this thing. It goes out, finds it, does any initialization it needs, and just gives you the tool that you want to use. So both of those combined makes the interface really simple, really easy to use. All right, so second part of the model of MVC is the data part. Everything I've discussed is just the business. So Kwong is going to tell you about all the data portion of the model.
So in order to separate the data accessing API operation from the business service, we need to build a data access object layer. So we use the DAO factory design pattern to design our DAO layer. So you can see this class is the abstract DAO factory. This class is implemented by a concrete DAO factory class. So our data class, which is a session bean, can use this one to produce to get a customer DAO, which is the DAO implementation, and work with it. So each of the DAO implementation will be inherited. We'll implement an interface, customer DAO. We do that because we practice code programming to an interface, not implementation. So basically later on, if we want to change to other database, we only need to change this chunk of code, and we don't need to change code elsewhere. So for example, after we visit Deloitte and we know that you guys are using DB2, we want to change the database from MySQL to DB2. We just need to change this chunk of code. The implementation will be responsible for connecting to the data source and manipulating data to the data source. Okay, so this is a ER diagram of our database. So we define the entity. We have product, we have customer and supplier and shopping cart order. Okay, so shopping cart is the connection between product and customer, which is represented like a shopping cart. Like when you add an item into a list, and you're not sure if you want to buy it, you know, you can just like delete it before you check out. After you check out, all of the information will go to order. Next, Ethan gonna talk about the view in the ABC.
We already saw the view quite a bit in the demo, but I'm just going to run through quick some of the technologies that we used and show a little JSP example after this. We used the JSP to display the information that we wanted to display from the server side. And we used Bootstrap that I talked about for responsive design, and it's easy to work with across many developers. It's easy to integrate together. And JavaScript and jQuery for validations, as well as some other functionality on the client side. And Ajax kind of worked hand in hand with the jQuery as far as passing the data as JSON back to the page so you can use it. And as we move towards some best practices, this was a good code snippet of ours of demonstrating tag libraries, expression language, and just using that to make a choice between the user header or the general header. And also, we have good naming conventions, so it's really descriptive. And this is actually our code from our homepage, so it's all broken down into sections. So if we want to change something, we change it in one place. Say, for example, the header, we change it in one place, and we don't have to go through every page and change everything. So it's kind of a good best practice example as we hand it off to Nathan to talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Okay, so as Ethan just mentioned, one of our best practices there, as kind of demonstrated as well by the multi-tier architecture and the MVC, would be separating the concerns. Essentially, our homepage was designed from different components. We have the header in one component, the body in another, and the footer in another. So it makes it easier to debug, to add features, etc. Some other best practices we made sure to implement, try catch finally. Essentially, this is great for handling connections. A lot of this is going on at the data layer. For instance, if you need to try to execute a query, you need to make sure, you need to catch and make sure that that is actually happening. And either way, you do need to make sure to close the connection. You don't want to leave connections dangling. It's kind of a risky operation. So there was one implementation of that. Another, again, at the data layer, we made sure to use string builder over string for building queries because that requires lots of string manipulation. Just for performance issues, we don't want to be creating lots of strings. As Kwong mentioned, coding the interface rather than implementation. Again, at the data layer, for instance, if we wanted to switch databases, this makes this very easy because we are only changing the implementation layer. The interfaces stay the same, the rest of our project stays the same. The only thing that is affected is the implementation itself, so we can switch databases at any time. Some other best practices, object composition over inheritance, again for flexibility, code reusability. We also made sure to implement Java naming conventions, such as the Java beans, and reading from a properties file, so that way all of our information is in one isolated location, much easier to read and modify as time goes on. So essentially, what we were trying to do here is just compile everything that we learned over the past, throughout this course. We wanted to implement best practices, try to make not only a functional piece of work, but also something that would perform well and would scale well, and ultimately just try to build something that we're proud of, which I think we succeeded in. And from here, Chase is going to go ahead and wrap us up.
Function I wanted to add, some feature. Sometimes I would delegate that to him, or vice versa, that sort of thing. But every once in a while, if it was a small feature, I would do it myself. So towards the end, we all kind of had a similar experience of, let me work on that area since I haven't done it yet. But initially, we did kind of divide and conquer.
So you talked about the database. I think we asked this question before. So if you, there was a request to add a new column, like I want to mark an item as a favorite. You want to add a new field in your table to the items. So how would you go about that process?
Essentially we could, add a new column, as you said, and because everything is separated, we would just have to add minor functionality elsewhere, but essentially it would build upon what we already have pretty easily. We could say, for instance, create a favorite button, and when you click that button, our action servlet would handle that, and it would pass that action down through the controller and through the model. and essentially we could put that product ID in that favorites column for that specific customer, for instance, and then similarly retrieve the information the same way using expression language and querying the database and getting that back out.
So you talked about stored procedures, can you give some examples of some any other custom queries that you had to write?
Yeah, so we have a couple of, many relationships in database design, and a lot of times we wanted to get information from two tables at once. So we do have several queries that are using joins and order bys and things like that. They don't get too complex, but mostly because our tables are pretty small, they don't have too much data, not many fields, But other than stored procedures, mostly just joins. And in a lot of cases, they were inner joins because we were looking for some very specific information. We weren't, trying to say, give me every customer and this from this other table. So inner joins are pretty prevalent throughout our database layer. All right,
That's all I have.
that's all we got. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good job, guys.
I think I got to meet you guys.
Thank you.
Hey, for your time.
Sunil? Chase. Thank you.
Ethan.
Nathan. You too.
Good job, guys.
Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it.